Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Culture Talks presented by the Confed Cares Working Group. Before we begin today, we want to acknowledge that we are in the territory of the Anishinaabe peoples of Northwestern Ontario. We work and live on the lands of Fort William First Nation, a signatory to the Robinson Superior Treaty of 1850. We honor their enduring connection to the land and commit to working together for a sustainable future. We also recognize that for those joining us remotely, that our seven regional campuses cross over multiple traditional and treaty territories, and that historical contributions of the Métis people, and that our students come to study from all over Turtle Island. With Valentine's Day right around the corner, love is in the air, but today we aren't talking about relationships or couples, we are talking about self-love. In fact, the idea of being your own Valentine. My name is Thomas McDonald, and I'm Sugi's Administrator of Communications and Marketing. And I'm just going to say that this is quite a change in crowd from last night's sex toy bingo. You're a lot less ruckus, and I bet you I could probably not get you to sing along to ABBA in order to win things today, which is definitely a difference from last night. Today, I want to welcome our panelists. I welcome my good friend, registered psychotherapist Rob Pollarine, who returns to us after his successful chat about relationships in the fall. Give Rob a bigger hand than that. You can do better than that. That's what I tell the bingo people too. You can do better than that. And she's no stranger to students in danger. Please welcome Confederation College's crisis navigator, mental health crisis navigator, Natalie Cochran. Let's give Natalie a big round of applause. So we're here to talk about self-love before we get you all sugar high, because we're having dessert today. We're having cupcakes and pie and coffee because, you know, it's just desserts healthy sex week. So, you know, we're pumping out the sweets this week. So let's talk about self-love and self-care. What's the difference? What is it? What does it mean? What's it all about? Click the button.
How about now? Yep. There we go. I don't know, Nat, do you want to start or do you want me to start? No, you don't. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Thomas, what's the difference between the two? Is there a difference between the two? I certainly think that there is. I think that self-care tends to be the things that we do when we think about that sort of topic. So things like exercise, consistent sort of exercise might be considered something that we will do for ourselves, or having a healthy relationship with food, for example, might be something that we do for ourselves. And then self-love, I kind of see as the way that we treat ourselves and the way that we think of ourselves. And there is an obvious difference between, you know, those two things. I might even argue that self-care would be part of self-love when we're thinking about all of the different things that come in with loving ourselves. Self-care would be part of those, exercising, like I said, and having a healthy relationship with food and being kind to one another. But that self-love is really about being kind to ourselves and unapologetically putting ourselves first and saying that we're important, the messages that we sort of tell ourselves. Yeah. I don't know, Nat, if you want to add to it or, yeah. Disagree?
Oh, that's loud. So, part of what my role is here at the college is meeting with students in those moments when they're not, you know, that maybe it's a mini crisis, a major crisis, but those moments when their typical coping skills, all of us have them, that just not clicking that day, or I just need some place to go and to vent and dump. And often when I talk to students, I'll say, for instance, I've met with students recently and they have their cell phones dinging the entire time we're chatting. And they're like, I gotta go. So-and-so needs me. I said, no, they don't. Is the building on fire? You need to take this time to just say, I'm busy, I'm in an appointment, shut the phone down, and you're allowed to do that. Like, I think we're so tuned in all the time to all the things we have to do, get to classes, we're gonna be late, on and on and on. But as long as somebody knows where you are, and if you're taking that time to come and chat with me, there's obviously something missing that you need to do some care about, right? So, and often I'll meet with students and they're overwhelmed. We know students' lives are busy and there's lots going on. And I'll say, there's that story of when you're on an airplane and the attendants are telling you, okay, if we get into a situation, it's an emergency, oxygen mask, straps from the ceiling, Don't run around the plane putting everybody else's mask on. Don't put your kids on first. Don't put your husband's. Put your mask on first. And it's kind of that same analogy in life. Like if you give to all kinds of people all the time, over and over and over, your well runs dry. And you're the one that has to kind of man that well and be there for other people and get yourself through your day. Never mind help other people. So put your own oxygen mask on first. Take a breath, calm down, and that gives you perspective to look around and then prioritize. And I think it sometimes helps to be mindful too and just break things down into moments. Okay, what is in my control right now? What is not in my control? What can I do? What can't I fix? Things like that.
I know a lot of people who work from that everything's on fire, but everything's fine place, right? Everything is on fire, but everything's fine. I'm fine. It's all good. It's all fine. I think sometimes people think that a measure of self-care is that measure of delusion, right? That we tell ourselves everything's fine, but it's okay to not be fine.
Yes. Yeah, I was just going to comment on Nat when you were talking. I thought of two stories as you were talking, and one of them is an old Aesop fable. If everybody knows, the Aesop fables, and it's the story of the goose and the golden egg that ended up popping in my mind. Sometimes when things pop into my mind, I just assume that they need to be shared. Gets me in trouble with my wife more often than I like to admit, but. So it's essentially the story of a farmer that goes into his geese, and he finds that one of them has laid a golden egg. He goes, "This is fantastic, right? This is much better than the regular eggs." And he comes back the next day, and boom, there's another golden egg just sort of sitting there. So then this farmer, in his haste to get all of the golden eggs, ends up killing the goose and finding out that after he kills the goose and opens it up, that there are no more golden eggs inside there. And I think that the thing that I like about that story is it kind of gives you this balance of this sort of like PPC balance. This comes from a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If anybody has read it or not read it and wants to, talks about a PC balance. P is the production and what something produces, and PC is the production capabilities, right? So in this case, this farmer ends up killing the thing that is producing the golden eggs, and I think that we can kind of extrapolate from that story some of the stuff that you were talking about, Nat, which is, in order to cultivate and be able to take care of other people and everything, we also need to take care of ourselves, because we are ourselves our own sort of goose. And then the other story that popped into my mind was the story of imagine that you're walking in the woods, as we tend to do in Thunder Bay. Need to take a little bit of a break, and nature is, being part of nature is an important way of life, I think, for many of us in this city. And you come across a person sawing down a tree, and he or she is just vigorously, going at this tree and looks exhausted. And the question you might ask them is like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm sawing a tree. Well, you look really tired. Yeah, I'm tired. How long have you been doing this for? I've been at this for hours. And then an obvious question comes up. Well, why don't you sharpen the saw? Right? Oh, I'm too busy sawing to sharpen the saw. Well, if you had taken the time, right, to stop and sharpen the saw, you'd find that cutting down the tree ends up becoming a little bit easier and a little bit less effort, right? Because you took the time to take a break, catch in with yourself. And I think that story also popped up when you were talking about the great metaphor of like the mask coming down, is that, each one of us in ourselves are a saw, is sort of like a tool of how to go about the world and how to be with ourselves. And if we aren't going to stop and take a few minutes to sharpen the saw and take care of ourselves through things like self-love and through things like self-care, we're going to be cutting down a tree with a saw that isn't working, and is exhausted and is burnt out and is not an effective way of kind of going about working on different issues, whether it's school issues and stress that comes out with school, or whether or not it's work issues. And so anyway, that's sort of the two stories that popped into my head as you were sharing your story. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the ways that we can actually put this into practice? We've got some great metaphors to think about that I think that people really resonate. But what are some of the actual like nuts and bolts? What are some things that we can do? Because I know for me, I'm a burn both candle at both ends kind of guy. I always have 65,000 things on the go, and my husband laughs at me. But I will go home and I will watch the dumbest things on Netflix. Like Emily in Paris. I don't at the end of a season, I don't remember any of the characters' names. I don't know anything that happened, but I can't wait to watch it again. It just doesn't live in my head, but it like cleans my brain and allows me to just focus on nothing of consequence. And that's one of my like tap out techniques. I just need some time where I don't do anything and be okay with giving myself time to do that. What are
Do you want to start, Nat, or do you want me to? Yeah. Thank you.
For me, Big Bang Theory. I've seen every episode. I will continue to see every episode until I die because I love it. But I just laugh and tune out, and that's exactly what I do. And it took me a long time to find ways to just tap out, like you said. I like that phrase. But I know for me, one thing I've learned is if I've had a really big day of talking to a lot of different students for a lot of different reasons, and there's lots of complex issues, I go home and I'll say, nobody can talk to me. My battery's dead. Like, give me an hour. I'm going to do the dishes. I'm going for a walk. I'm going to pet my cat for 3 days, whatever. I'm going to just chill before I'm ready. I can't say another word. Give me that space. And luckily, everybody in my house gets it. Another thing I find is I crochet. I'm a little bit of a nut bar for crocheting. So I'm in student success. I have a little baskety doodad, and I have some little gifts for people here today. But for me, that was, I find if I don't do it every day at some point, it de-stresses me. And I never knew how to do it before. My grandma tried to teach me when I was little, and she yanked the needles away and said, Natalie, you're so useless. Give me those things. So as I got older, I went on YouTube and I taught myself how to do it, and I dig it. And I find I calm down. It's some of it's mindless and just repetitive. For me, repetitive is good. The tapping out of a show I've seen a million times, but I don't have to engage. It's predictable. I know what to expect, and it's fun. So those are a few things that I've learned along the way, along with all of the, the routine. Like I talk to students about sleep hygiene, how important that is. Dietary, eating properly, sleep, lots of water, lots of different stuff we can talk about in there. But those are some tricks that I've used for myself to kind of manage.
I was just going to back up and do like sort of a promotion for self-love. The research is fairly clear from what I understand on the topic that it leads to better mental health. So it fights mood disorders, it fights anxiety disorders, it fights eating disorders. More self-acceptance, higher self-esteem, more motivation, stronger determination, increased self-awareness, better sleep, better ability to cope with stress. So again, it's a really important topic. As far as a couple of things that I might sort of encourage or to help build self-love, I did a bit of a list, just sort of meditating on this topic. So number one, stop comparing yourself with others. I learned this a lot from reading, and I will be the first to admit that I haven't read the whole thing, but Marcus Aurelius wrote a book called Meditations. He was a Roman emperor, and he believed that comparing yourself to others is a waste of time and leads more to conformity and false paths, as opposed to sort of like being true to yourself. He had two quotes that I really like. I wrote them down. First of all, life is not about being better than other people. It's not about achieving more than people in our circles. And then his second quote is, the object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. And I thought that both of those are really,
it's not wrong.
And not wrong, not wrong at all. And we do have a propensity sometimes to compare ourselves with other, and thinking that in order to achieve things that we want, that we have to be like somebody else. I might even a little bit of a caution here, but if you're going to compare yourself to anybody, sort of compare yourself to who you were yesterday, as opposed to anybody else and what their achievements are. Number two that I was thinking about was consider not only the criticism, but also the criticizer. And I think that this goes down to the idea, meditation, for example, is a big self-care thing that many of us promote, but it's about sort of like slowing down. So when you get criticized, you get to decide how much of that criticism you take on, or whether or not you're going to take on that criticism. And at least in my life, I try to do this because I'm much less interested in taking on criticism from somebody who I don't believe has my best interest at heart. So it's not about not being okay with being criticized and taking criticism, but it's also about, is the person that is criticizing me, do they want me to grow? Do they have my best interest at heart, or are they just trying to hold me down? And I think that's an important piece to consider.
That's really interesting, because something you said, your grandma took the crochet hook away and said, don't do this. I work with theater people, right? Adults who don't come from a performing background, or at some point a teacher told them to stop because they weren't good. They evaluated the joy out of something, and that makes me so sad as a person, right? Because if you've heard a story enough times and you've told yourself the story enough times, you believe it, right? And you're right. And there are people. Is everyone the world's best singer? No. But should everyone have the joy of singing? Absolutely. Right. So it's when those things you've refound the joy in something that you were told you weren't good at. I do not have the world's best singing voice. I love singing. You find opportunities that allow you to do things that bring you joy, but people who've had the joy educated out of them about something, that's what that spoke to me about, right? If that is the thing that brings you joy to your soul and spirit and makes you love yourself a little more, give yourself permission to do it, whether you're good at it or not. Right?
That was actually my number 5 point down here, which was, we tend to believe the messages that we hear from people, and the ones that we hear often. So be choosy about who you associate with and who you call friends, and who you care about, and who you spend your time with. Your value does not lie in what your body looks like. And I think that's another important part of both self-care and self-love, that it's important to praise your body and all that it does for you. Challenge yourself in ways that promote growth, I think is another one. So one of my favorite books that I would say, to me at least, was a life-changing book in many ways, is called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. And he talks about, when you're trying to build a talent or a skill or something, it's important to kind of be realistic about expectations, and also you don't take on a challenge that is so far out of your reach that you end up getting frustrated with it. But of course, the challenging is sort of part of human growth. So to try, when you're building your skills, to try and practice in a way that just goes beyond your abilities, so you're challenging yourself and you're not getting frustrated. I think that most of us overestimate what we can accomplish in a month, but we also underestimate what we can accomplish in a year. So consistency is important in that regard. Be curious about yourself, and not judgmental. I think that every single one of us has the propensity to do things that are out of character for ourselves. And it's important to kind of look at that, not in sort of a judgmental way, but in a curious way. And if we can put down that judgmentalness that so often creeps into us, we come at it at a way where we can grow from it, as opposed to being held down by it. And I think that that's just a process. That's just a principle of self-love. Number 7, be as compassionate to yourself as you would to a friend. you may try to change in ways that allow you to be more healthy and happy, but this is done because you care about yourself, not because of you being worthless or unworthy. And I think that that's a really important distinction to make, that that growth is obviously important, but it doesn't have to come from a place of judgmentalness. It can come from a place of wanting to move forward yourself. Don't be ashamed of telling others how important they are to you. That one I learned probably more so in the last, several years, that it's okay to tell a friend that you love them. That's okay. And by acting in that way in the world, you also encourage other people to do that too. And that's a really powerful thing to do, is sort of like be the change you want. I think it was Gandhi that said, be the change that you want to be in the world, something along those lines. The number 9, the attitude you should have about yourself is the attitude that you would have to somebody you genuinely care for. Again, that's a very, I think, self-love way of looking at it. And then my last one, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about, is embrace failure and abolish perfectionism. I don't think that you will find very many people that are really successful in life, financially successful, but also successful on the inside, where it wasn't paved with a road of failure. And it's every human being. It's really, I think, a necessary part of learning, quite frankly, is to be consistently sort of failing. It's not that you're failing, it's the attitude and the perspective that failure, that you take on as failure. Failure can hold you down, or failure can motivate you up. And I find it to be a really important part of growth and self-love, to kind of say, okay, I didn't make it happen this time. One of my favorite quotes is from Thomas Edison, guy who engineered the light bulb.
Stole the light bulb.
Stole the light bulb. Yeah. When he was asked, about failure, he said, I didn't fail. I just figured out 10,000 ways that it won't work. And I love that way of looking at it. It's like, no, it didn't work. It's not going to hold me down. I'm going to continue. And I think that's a very self-love.
I love Bob Ross's take on that, which is happy little accidents.
Happy little
right?
accidents. Yeah.
Nothing's a mistake. It's just a happy little accident.
Absolutely. Nat, sorry, I don't know if you not to put you on the spot. I don't want to feel like I'm taking over, Yeah.
One thing I was, sorry.
Yeah, please.
One thing I was that really resonates with me too, about failing, because lots of times I'll meet students in those moments when they have failed, or they are failing, or the projection is this is not going to pan out. And I say similar things to students, that is maybe just showing you where maybe you need to work harder, try harder, do things a different way. This way didn't work. Is this the right course? Is this the right time? What have we got going on outside life? Like, we bring our outside into college. We all have lives, right? And stressors and families and relationships and pressures. So sometimes it can just be in that moment, that mindfulness, like, okay, I got to get a grip. This didn't work. What do I do moving forward? Let's make a bit of a plan. Or is there a bigger conversation to be had? Because there's nothing wrong with finding out what doesn't work, and then let's direct ourselves to try something new that didn't work. Like, I'm not from Thunder Bay, I'm from Southern Ontario, but I have had so many experiences moving to this city that I would never have had otherwise if I hadn't left where I was, come here, tried a bunch of things. Some things didn't work out, and here's where I landed, and I love it. But yeah, I meet students in those moments where failing is a huge stressor, upset, crisis. And it's important, I think, to be mindful of what have you accomplished. Okay, take a breath and look at where you are. Look at all the things you're managing at the same time as trying to go to school. Like, these are huge accomplishments. So I like that last analogy about 10,000 ways that it didn't work, and on to 10,001. Maybe that'll be the one that does. So.
Well, and working here, there are so many opportunities that we have, and it must be the same for you when you see someone trying something that doesn't work, and then finally they find the thing that clicks, right? Is that magic moment, right, where you're like, student comes into a program. I used to work in residence. Students come into a program. I used to say to Doris, wrong program, right? Sure enough, wrong program. Student tries the right program, and all of a sudden they're academically motivated. They know what they're doing. They're excited about their life. Right, they figured something out about themselves that they didn't know, because in their head from the time that they were 3, they were going to be a pilot, and the pilot is the wrong thing, right? Or I'm going to be a social worker. It's the wrong thing. And then they realize they're going to work with their hands, and all of a sudden they're happy, right? It's finding that click. And finding the click in your own life, I think, is interesting too, right? When you're like, oh, turns out that wasn't it, right? And being okay to let that go.
And also, and I mean, you'd know this from theater, right, Thomas, is that the journey is as important, often more important than the destination is, right? How we get to a particular place, and being open to being in the process. I mean, I think all artistic endeavors, whether or not it's theater or painting, the focus on the process is really where the journey and the growth lies. So yeah.
So let's, as we're sort of getting down to the end of our time today, what are our final thoughts, our final takeaways, our final challenges for our audience today?
No.
Nat's an introvert. She needs a minute.
I am an introvert.
Okay, you want me to go first? Okay. I think for conclusion, I would say that I think every one of us has, we have a light inside of us, and it benefits us all to let that light out, because without us doing it, the world becomes a little bit of a dimmer place, and this world can get very, very dark. In places it might be getting dark right now, and worrisome, but it's not just for every single one of us as individuals to recognize that light and bring it out, but it also helps the world if we end up doing that. And I would probably say in conclusion that the world needs you to just be you, and that you are enough being you. When you think about when I think about sort of like the history of the world, right? Like, what are we, 5.5 billion? The world's 5.5 billion years old, or something along those lines. Never in that 5.5 billion years old has there been somebody exactly like you. You're completely and utterly unique, genetically, personality wise, all that kind of stuff. There has never been a you in the entire history, and it's hard to even conceptualize what 5.5 billion years is. The number is just so massive, and the world needs you to be you. And part of that obviously is to love yourself, and to practice self-love, and to practice self-care, and to be okay with coming out and going, this is who I am, and this is how I can contribute to myself, and how I can contribute to the world. So, and that is a truism for every single human being, that there has never been anybody in the history of the world like you. So that's what I would kind of do as a conclusion. Yeah. Nat.
That's awesome. One thing I've learned through my years of life experiences is learning to give yourself grace. And often when I meet with students, I'll say, you've never done this moment before. I did not wake up on, this is today. Tomorrow we don't know. There's no predictor. We can't go backwards. We can hope to look forward, but we're in this moment right now. And so something I've learned myself that I try to say to students or people that I meet with is, we've never done this moment before. So you don't know what you don't know, and give yourself grace, because there's always that opportunity to learn better, and then you do better. So if it's not working out right now, the next moment it might. And that's why it's really important to keep going, because I can't predict what's going to happen in the next moment, but give yourself that grace to learn more and do more and stretch and reach more, because there's, like you said, I love that. There's never been another you. So, and there never will be. So
as we come to a close, I just wanted to thank our panelists for joining us today. Let's have another round of applause for Rob and Natalie. Make sure you have your dessert ticket. They are there. And we have some amazing milk and water cupcakes and some pie and coffee at the back. So stay, have a chat, enjoy that. Join us next month for Culture Talks during SDG Week. That's Sustainable Development Goal Week, to learn more about a minimal life, reducing waste, and doing more with less. Thanks for joining us today. And I'll close on a Dr. Seuss quote: "There's no one in the world more youer than you." So take that and head out into your day with all the love in your heart for yourself and everyone else. Thanks for joining us today, and have a great afternoon.